So good morning, everybody. So it's Wednesday. I'm still getting used to this as well. So this is the ESSERF fund for the program meeting. So I think we now have it set up that people come in muted. So if you can leave yourself muted as much as possible, and then if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or you can write a message in the chat box, and then we will we'll attend to that as we throughout the meeting. So today, Chelsea has a presentation that she's going to do this morning, and then we can open it up for any questions. And you can of course ask questions throughout her presentation, you know, by the either raising your hand or putting it up in the chat box, and then we'll get to those questions as Chelsea pauses at different points, and I'll let her know that there's a question. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chelsea.
Thanks, Tyler. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. And so for the same reason that I did this last week, I am going to take a few minutes and go over the basic facts of the funding, where it came from, and some of the allowability. What is new this week, which will continue to be new each week we meet, are the examples of approved projects and some of the most common things we're seeing in submissions. So as of this morning, we have approved a little over 20 district SAU applications. That is nearly all of them. Those that have not been approved have been reopened either because information was missing or we need further information to be able to understand what the project that you're hoping to do is, so that we can, of course, accept your reimbursement request once you have your grant award notification. For the 20 plus districts that have received approval, last week they received their grant award notification through the GEM automated system. So if you are wondering, you know, did I get that or did I just miss the email? If you log into your ESSER application portal, if you are approved, you'll see that grant award notification has been populated. If you have questions, just as we said last week, please send me a private chat while we're in the meeting, so that when I turn the meeting back over to Tyler, I can get you an answer before the meeting concludes. We also have had a few questions that have come up around some of the questions that were asked back in May. And a few folks have emailed me to say, hey, Chelsea, do we have an answer yet from the U.S. Department of Education? Unfortunately, the questions we sent over the past 2 months have not been answered. We've only received one response, and that one response was about public comment. So at this point, if you sent a question in and I confirmed that it was sent to the U.S. Department of Education, they have not responded to any of those questions. So thank you for your continued patience, and I will continue to email them daily and call them to remind them of how important this is and urgent it is as well. So the sample applications and I'm not going to read my private messages while I'm sharing my screen, because that actually outs you, I just realized. I apologize. But the sample from last week, Tyler is going to actually put it on the website. So the CARES Act webpage that's related to the DOE's COVID-19 page, we're going to put that slide deck as well as this slide deck on that webpage later today, so that you can read what others are thinking of and possibly use them in your application. So as I said, as a brief reminder, we're working off from the CARES Act, which had an incredible amount of money for different parts of government. And for Maine, and for all of us that are on this call today, we will be talking only about the K-12 SEA and LEA funding under ESSERF. But there is also the governor's funds, which for Maine was 9.2 million. Those funds are being used for connectivity. So the connectivity work has gone through surveys with the Innovation Office. And many of you, over 600 schools in Maine, have been a part of that work and received devices as a result to connect your students. That final survey will go out very soon. And if you'd like to be included in the survey, again, you'll want to send a message to Paige Nichols. I'll put her email in the chat and you can be included. And then the higher education portion of funding. So for Maine, we received approval very quickly. We're one of the first states in the country to receive approval, which is why I think the U.S. Department of Education is a bit behind in, one, they're giving us our reporting requirements, but two, answering our questions. We had questions before most states had even approved and been, applied for and approved for their funding. Our application, the entire application, as well as the reimbursement system, are all in the GEM system. That is the system that Maine uses for almost all of our federal programs. And if you still need a login, send me an email. We'll get you set up today. All business managers and ESEA directors' logins will work. You will have until September 30th, 22 to obligate. This was confirmed in the U.S. Department of Education's most recent FAQs. And as a reminder, things to be thinking about if you've yet to submit, based on our view of the back end of the application system, there's only about a handful of districts that have never gone into the application portal and looked at the application. And I'm guessing that most of you have been in the application portal. That's why you show up through these meetings. But if you are just starting out, you need to make sure that you complete a needs assessment at the local level. We've had some great examples last week. We'll share a few more this week. But the strength in the needs assessment is showing that you've been having conversations as a whole community with several different stakeholders to figure out what are our priorities in this moment that we need to address to support our students. Concrete timelines. We need to be able to see that you've set out a, within reason, a timeline that works within the allowability of this grant. And you have an idea of when you intend to spend the money. We are not looking for exact, days, but we are looking for the month and the year. Align budgets and project descriptions. An item that we've been seeing quite a bit recently is confusion around the definition of equipment and supplies. And so thinking more about that item and does it meet that $500 threshold, and does it meet some other requirements that are in the federal program's handbook. If there's an issue though, our team is the team that's supposed to catch that, which might be why you may have an opened application this morning. You may have put a lot of money in equipment, but then you described that you're purchasing masks and very low dollar items, which we've opened it to say, please move that to supplies, which will also impact how you're going to track your purchases in the future. We've also opened a few applications because there wasn't a description under the budget. So if we don't know what it is that you've actually purchased, we won't be able to provide reimbursement or complete any of the monitoring requirements that we have for federal programs. And I noticed two of the districts actually talked to the person that submitted the application, and they said, I swear to you, Chelsea, I put something in there before I push submit. And I believe that, right? So it might be that there was a glitch in the system. And so you'll just let us know and we'll get our agenda administrator in there to help. And then the last thing I just want to mention, if you have been receiving emails from the system that say your application is approved, your application has been reopened, that means everything is working well. As we know, in our first week of having the application portal open, the application was working, but the communication tool to send you those automated emails was not working. But some of you told me it is working, and you've now received 3 emails from me, and you'd appreciate it if I would send fewer emails. So I'm glad it's working, but you will receive a weekly email if your application is open. And that's just us trying to be there to say, hey, if you need help or technical assistance, we're here, just reach out and we'll provide you the support you need. So some examples of needs assessments that looks really great. As I mentioned before, this is an example. This school, the district is in Aroostook County. They're talking about county meetings as well as educational leaders and health professionals, parents, families. That's an excellent description. By no means is that absolutely required, but we thought it was a really good example to share with the group. Another example, again, this one is surveying families, right? And so making sure that the decisions we make as educational leaders honor the voice of our students and their families, because they also, are having needs that are changing as the days turn into weeks and months. And so that was another really great example that the team looked at. And then the proposed timeline, again, like if you don't know exactly the month and the day, that's okay, but we really want to encourage you. Month and year is super helpful for us, but at the very least, the school year we need to see to know when you're intending to spend the money. It's obviously twofold. One, we need to be able to report back to the federal government. Maine's 60-day report is due on June 28th, but also we need to be sure that we have a better idea of when the reimbursement system will be really full. We don't want you to be waiting on reimbursement requests, and we want to be able to process those really quickly for you. So some of the funding that we've been seeing going a lot towards additional staff members for social emotional learning and support, guidance counselors, social workers. And so this one is talking about support specifically for the high school, as well as taking some funding and training staff on how to better support students. We really like this one, of course, because it's kind of looking at wraparound services, but it's also looking at SEL, and the department will be putting out SEL later this summer to support districts as well. And it really ties into some of the professional learning that the Office of School and Student Support under Rich Meserve and Bear Shea have really been focused on while we've been in this remote learning context. So their timeline, April to June, things always change. We understand that. And if it changes drastically, you can give us an email and we will reopen it for you. Another project that's really focused on professional development, knowing that our teachers are working in a very different space now, that we're not in person, but we're remote. And so a lot of districts we've been seeing putting in money to provide that PD to teachers. That's in addition to PD that would typically be provided. So a common one, the timeline also is really familiar. A lot of districts have committed to providing some PD either at the front end or the back end of summer, as well as throughout the next upcoming school year. And then we have an example here with transportation. And the team wanted to share this one today because we know that everyone is grappling with how can we get our students to school safely. And so this district will actually be having more adults involved in the transportation for students to be sure that students are following those protocols that for most little people will be a challenge. And they have a substantial amount of their grant in this bucket. But again, it's a local decision, right? So when you meet with your community, your school boards, your ed leadership, you might decide this is a priority, and that's great. The conversation that we've had over the past couple of weeks, of course, has been when I spend money in some of these buckets, will it impact future state aid? And with this one, you'll see in their description, it is very clear that this is in addition to what they're already spending. And so there isn't an issue there because it's not replacing funds, it's in addition to what's already there. Tyler, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that's the important piece. If it adds to what you're already spending, then there shouldn't be an impact on your state funding versus moving costs that already exist over to it.
Thank you. And then this one is looking at, they're buying supplies, and they're buying some of the supplies that their community has decided will be necessary for them to return to school. We do not share this this example because the department is saying that these things will be required. Each community will have a discussion, we'll look at the metrics and to make these decisions at the local level. But this community has had that conversation, and at this point in time, this is the direction they plan on moving in. And so that is why we share the example. We also like the level of detail. With this level of detail, there will be no delays in the reimbursement system because we'll be able to look at an invoice, see that the budget categories line up, and in that first invoice that will have forced compliance, we'll be able to see what exactly should be included on each of those invoices. And then this example we've put up here, one, because of course it came up a few weeks ago, but then two, it had it only had a few sentences, but it told us enough that we could approve it. And I think this question came from down east, and if I'm remembering correctly, Mitch had asked this question. Will there be training for custodians? And at this point, there isn't anything on the calendar, but some districts are moving forward with planning their trainings for custodians. And that's exactly what this district is doing. You see just a little bit of money in salaries and benefits at 1,000, and you see a much larger amount of money in the supplies and equipment. So the tools that the custodians are going to need and the actual cleaning agents, they're going to use a lot of their funding to address that need. And again, it's not the Maine Department of Education's role to tell you what we think the priorities should be. You decide the priorities, and we are just looking to make sure that it is allowable. And so if we reopen it, it's not a conversation about whether or not we think it should be a priority. It's a conversation about the level of description required to be able to accept your reimbursement request. And then this last one is a really popular one that after we shared the example, I think about a week ago, we started to see a few more of these, or versions of a Dean of Students for online learning or remote learning. And I've asked the superintendent actually to share some information around her job description for this position. And so that's why you see at the top white box, it's exactly what she put in her application, which we've been able to approve. But then if you look below, this is the job description that she shared in the job posting. And if you want to discuss this further with the superintendent that provided this example, send me a private message and I'm happy to connect you with her. I was fortunate enough to get a few moments of her time, and she was telling me more about the role. And it sounds like a really great position, regardless of whether or not you're fully in person or partially in person next year. The role itself just seems to be a really great support for students. And I'm sure she'd be happy to chat with you further about how her and her community made this decision to bring this person on board to do this work. So that concludes the sharing out of some of the great best practices or ideas that are floating out there. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen and read the chat. And so those of you that are private, I promise, I won't be sharing my screen, so it'll remain private. And I'll answer your questions, and then I'll hand it back to Tyler for his updates for this week. I just have one message, Tyler, and it is a district saying they're approved and they're excited. So if they're approved, if you are approved, you have a grant award notification. That does mean that the reimbursement system has opened for you. And so you are welcome to start submitting reimbursement requests. Just a reminder though, that first invoice should be anything that's happened from March 13th up to date to catch us up. It also will need you to submit your compliance. After that, though, you can submit on a weekly or a monthly basis, but you are good to go, and we hope to be able to look at those reimbursement requests very quickly for you and get that money back out to you. And that's all that I have in the chat, so I'm going to hand it back to you, Tyler.
Okay. So as Chelsea alluded to, we're going to put some of the material that had been going into the Teams website. We're actually going to put it up on, so her two presentations, are going to go on to the COVID-19 or the sorry, not COVID-19, but the ESSERF funding webpage. So we've had some difficulties getting some people into the teams, and so to be able to have everybody be able to access the information, we're going to move those presentations onto the website. And the recorded videos, again, because we had been putting them into Teams, and not everybody has access to Teams or not ready access, we're going to put those on YouTube. On the department, the department has a YouTube page, and that way everybody will have access to it. And I'll make sure to once that's up and ready, we'll share the link for that YouTube page. And then, so I do want to note, because I got the question after last week's presentation, and so just to clear up, so you'll notice in what Chelsea was just sharing on her presentation, we had actually taken out the function codes from the student support and staff support and transportation. So the non-instructional costs, we had taken out those function codes, including in the instructional costs. And so what we noticed is that projects may not align perfectly with the function code and how the description. So in the description in your project, they should match for what's being stated. So if it's a student support or staff support, but as a business manager, you should still follow the handbook. So for those expenditures, so you'll notice sometimes something that may be placed in school administration and what's labeled as school administration may actually be a student or staff support or something different. And so we took those out because it was creating a bit of uncertainty around that. So we wanted to, where they don't always align perfectly with the application and your coding, we took the function codes out to hopefully help you better understand that they may not always perfectly align. So I now have a couple in the general chat. There's a couple of things that have come in, Chelsea. Hold on one second. So Mitchell is saying, I've lumped a number of projects under one cost area and then gave one total cost. Is that okay? And so as long as the cost makes sense for the area that you've lumped them under, and so that will be reviewed by Chelsea and a few other people, and I'm there as well. And so that'll get reviewed, and they'll review it to make sure that for the costs that you've put in there that they make sense for that under that one cost area. And if something doesn't make sense, then they'll reopen that section and ask for either some clarification or a change. And so Tara seems to be the same question. And then Diana, have there been any approvals for a modest admin cost to have a grant lead administrator? So has that actually been, because that seemed to be what Diana's talking about, Chelsea, and I'm not unsure, I don't remember if that type of cost has actually been approved at this point or yet by the department.
Chelsea might have stepped away.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is she might have stepped away, but
we did approve one, I believe yesterday or the day before, for a grant lead.
okay. So
Hi, Tyler. I did step away because we have folks that they think they're in the waiting room, but I don't see them. So they've called my other phone.
oh,
We have approved that. And again, it's reasonable and necessary.
Aha, and now I see somebody in the waiting room.
Oh, she's there. That's exactly who just called me. Do you see her
Okay.
in the waiting room?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
So yes, we have approved that type of cost. So that was the end of what, my update, and those were the 3 questions that we have in a general chat. I'm not sure if anybody sent you any more private, Chelsea. I don't have any private.
I do have another one, and it is we're planning to do some training for students on how to socially distance in school, both on the bus and in the classroom, and what category should I put that under? And so, Tyler, I'm actually going to hand it back to you because the function codes are your area of expertise. I said COVID-19 student support, but I want to just check with you as well.
So can you say it one more, the actual cost again?
So it's training for students so that they can learn to socially distance, both in the school bus setting as well as in the classroom.
So I'm kind of, that's something completely different than anything I've seen. So I think what I'll have to do is kind of look to see where that might fit, whether that might fit into, so I'm not going to say anything because then somebody might take that as that's how we say it. So I need to look at the descriptions for a couple of different codes, and see where that best fits.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yep.
And then another one around admin costs, and I think we've covered that one while I was away. And that if it's reasonable and necessary, the team most certainly has and will approve it. The question around lumping a number of projects in one cost area, Tyler, did you answer that one as well?
Yep.
Okay. Then we're caught up.
Okay. So I'll give just a moment in case anybody is typing an additional question, but otherwise we'll end the recording for this week. And once Tyler does have, so it's Tyler Rollins, not myself, does have those videos up into YouTube, I'll send a link out to the whole group.
So there's 2 questions in the chat, but one private and one public. The private one, when does the application need to be submitted? We, as I said, have had almost 30 applications submitted, most of which have been approved. We've also heard from a lot of superintendents that have said, I need to wait until late summer to submit, which is absolutely fine. We would like to have them submitted during next fall. But of course, you have the term limits within the grant, and we've put that in the FAQs as well. So you have the time you need, but this is something that we expect to see everyone submitting in the coming months, not right away. But it's a local decision, so you and your community can decide what's best for you. There is not a deadline. So with ESEA, IDEA, we've always put a very firm deadline, August 1. That is not the case here. A question about where the allocations are. So all district allocations are in the application. The non-public equitable shares is something that you need to determine at the local level, and you'll determine that after your consultation with all eligible approved non-publics. And there is a calculator that the Title I team has provided to help you make that calculation. But because of the nature of this funding and how quickly this needs to happen, this of course will be something that you'll need to do on your end through the consultation process. There is a consultation form on the DOE's webpage, and I'll hyperlink that below. If you'd like to use it during consultation, you absolutely can. And if there is a dispute and the nonprofit public would like to move forward with that dispute, they would need to submit their dispute to the department. Our ombudsman is Shelley Chassis-Jandro. I'll also put her email in the chat.
So I do have a question of a suggestion for the function code of PPE. So student is easy in the sense of if you're doing student, put it in the nurse's office. And I think just for ease, I don't see any issue with also putting, if you're buying PPE for staff, to put it into the nurse's office. I think it actually says student health, but there are some additional within the description. It actually expands beyond student anyways. So I think putting all PPE in there shouldn't be an issue. Okay, so I'm gonna.
I have I have two more.
Okay.
I do. During consultation, a private school has asked to change the structure of the building in some way, which would require construction. That wouldn't be allowable. It would need to be something that could be removed from the private school. So I don't know the details, of course, because you didn't put them in the chat, but if you need more information, we can send you those requirements that are in federal documents, but they cannot do major construction with their portion of their equitable share. And then the other question that's come in, we've not been able to control building access after we've sanitized the buildings because people are circumventing our swipe system by using master keys. We found many people have these keys and shouldn't, so we'd like to rekey the doors so that we can control access once the building has been sanitized. Could this be a COVID-19 cost? I don't know the answer to that question because this is the first time we've been asked it, but we will submit this question for a response later today. And now, Tyler, that is the final question I have in the chat.
Okay. Thank you, Chelsea. So I'm going to go ahead and so, sorry. Thanks everybody for coming today again. So tomorrow we have, there's probably lots of meetings going on, but we have our weekly business manager meeting. And so I actually won't be there, but Paula will be there and we'll be presenting on a business manager related topic. I'm sure she will come up with something great. So we will host that meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock, like we do every week. And so hope to see the business managers there. And other than that, thanks everybody for coming today.